Don't pay attention to the comments, because later in the video, I'm going to challenge you to see if you can solve the mystery behind the 3 strange and suspicious stories we just told. The answers to these mysteries might be spoiled in the comments, so be careful. In every video on our channel, we share 3 mysterious stories with you, and you have to guess which one is real and which one is made up. At the end of the video, we'll reveal which stories were real and which weren't. But what really matters is whether your guesses are right or not. Story number 1, the inner voice. Charlie wasn't exactly lucky in life. Things didn't go well for him, and he later admitted that himself. But one night, when Charlie was a teenager, his luck changed, and he realized he had actually been a lucky guy all along. He just didn't know it. Let's go back to that fateful night. As a teenager, Charlie didn't have much money. He spent a lot of time working in the streets and sometimes asking for help from strangers. One of those exhausting nights, after hours of hard work, Charlie decided to stop by a pub to grab a glass of water. He nervously and with some fear approached the bartender and asked for just a glass of water. This was Charlie's first time in that pub, and everything felt new and strange to him. But one thing stood out more than the others: the bartender's behavior. Charlie was scared and uneasy because the man had an angry look on his face and was acting gruff. A few moments later, as the bartender turned to serve other customers, Charlie quietly got up and left the pub without drawing attention. He didn't drink a drop of that water and quickly ran away. No one followed him, but this wasn't the end of the story. A few weeks later, Charlie came across a shocking newspaper headline. He learned that the man who had served him at the pub, the one he had been so afraid of, had been arrested for murder. The man turned out to be a psychopath who had been poisoning drinks, causing the deaths of several people. To your surprise, you actually know this person, Charlie, and you probably have memories of him. Are you thinking of all the Charlies you know? Let me put your mind at ease. This Charlie we're talking about is none other than Charlie Chaplin. But do you think this really happened to Chaplin, or were we just trying to trick your mind? Stick with us until the end of the video to find out. Story number 2, the Ice Mountain. In 1950, a group of 7 young Swiss climbers set out to summit a high peak in the Swiss Alps. This group consisted of 6 men and 1 woman, all experienced and highly skilled climbers. They were looking for a greater challenge, but little did they know that this would be their final challenge. After days of climbing, the group reached a point where they were just a little away from the summit. But at this moment, the weather turned horribly bad. Strong winds, heavy snow, and thick fog enveloped the entire mountain. Despite the situation, the group decided to press on, confident in their experience and sure that they would reach the summit quickly. However, after that, the mountain fell silent and there was no further news of the climbers. In the last contact with the group, one of them said something strange. In a quiet voice, one of the climbers said, "Mabel is acting really weird. It's like her mind is somewhere else." Search efforts to find the group began with rescue teams from several countries joining in, but no trace of them was found. Even after weeks of searching, there was still no sign of the group. The poor weather and snow-covered mountains made the search incredibly difficult. A year later, when hope was almost lost, a group of other climbers stumbled upon bodies in one part of the mountain. All the members of the group were found near an icy valley, except for one. Based on the evidence, it was believed the group had reached the summit, but couldn't descend because of the bad weather and became stuck. They likely succumbed to frostbite and oxygen deprivation. The case was suspicious because the body of one person, Mabel, the only woman in the group, was missing. As we mentioned earlier, in the last phone call, one of the members pointed out Mabel's strange behavior. But what became a topic of conversation was why only Mabel was missing. Now, let me ask you, the viewers, do you think the climbing group got stuck because of Mabel's plan? Or do you think this story is entirely fictional and there was never a climbing group? Stick with us until the end of the video to uncover the truth behind this mystery. Before we dive into story number 3, pay attention to this. In every video on our channel, we share 3 mysterious and suspicious stories. And by the end of the video, you'll need to guess which one is real and which one is made up. So, if you want to test your brain power, make sure to subscribe to our channel, hit the bell icon, and like this video. Now, let's continue with the stories. Story number 3, The Return. On April 24, 1950, two people named Linda and Johnson were hiking through the nature of Texas. They were on their way back home when they suddenly disappeared and were never heard from again. When they didn't return by nightfall, their families began searching, but no trace of their presence was found along the hiking path. A few days later, rescue teams arrived and began their search. They covered several kilometers of surrounding forests and mountain trails, but there was no sign of the two. Many of those involved in the search were confused and astonished. It even seemed as if there was no evidence they had ever been there. Finally, after prolonged searching, a strange clue was found. The search team discovered footprints from the two hikers near the same area, but what was strange was that there were no signs of damaged plants or trees nearby. This suggested that they had moved very carefully, making sure not to harm anything. It meant that they had deliberately and cautiously passed through the area. Of course, these were only the police's assumptions, and there was no conclusive evidence. The search team followed the footprints, which eventually led them to a river. The footprints disappeared into the water, and after a thorough examination of the area, nothing was found. The investigation slowed down. A few weeks later, one of the searchers returned to the same river and found the two individuals. They were alive, with their eyes wide open and their mouths dry, slowly dying. When the rescue teams reached them, they could barely speak. But the most significant point was that neither of them could remember where they had been or how they had ended up there. They hadn't forgotten, they hadn't gone mad. They just had no idea how they got there. Do you believe this? Do you think these two were really lost and lost part of their memory? Or do you think we made up this story to challenge you? The stories for this part of the program are done, and now it's time to find out which of the 3 stories we've shared were real and which ones were fictional. But before we reveal it, let's quickly review each of the stories. Story number 1, The Inner Voice. A young boy with financial difficulties went to a pub for a glass of water. He was frightened by the harsh behavior of the bartender and fled without drinking. A few weeks later, he read in the newspaper that the bartender had been arrested for poisoning drinks, leading to the deaths of several people. The boy who narrowly escaped death at the pub was Charlie Chaplin. Story number 2, The Icy Mountain. In 1950, a Swiss group of 7 set out to summit a tall mountain in the Alps. The team consisted of 6 men and 1 woman. During their last communication, one member said, "Mabel is acting strange, like her mind is elsewhere." After this, there was no news of the group. Rescuers found the bodies of 6 members of the group near an icy ravine, but the body of the only female member, Mabel, was never found. Some people suspected that Mabel was responsible for the deaths of the others. Story number 3, The Return. In 1950, 2 people were out hiking but disappeared without a trace. After a few weeks, search teams found footprints that led them to a river, where the 2 were found barely alive. After they recovered, they couldn't remember how they ended up there. Some people think they might be lying about losing their memory, and that they actually remember what happened. Now it's time to reveal the truth behind the stories. You have 10 seconds to guess which story is real and which one is fake. Remember, anything is possible. Maybe all the stories are true. Maybe all are made up. Or maybe a mix of both. Do you believe Charlie Chaplin was saved from death in this way during his youth? If you do, congratulations! You guessed it right. What do you think about Mabel and the Ice Mountain story? Do you think it's impossible that the body of the only woman never turned up? If you think that way, you've been fooled. This story is true too. What's your guess about the 2 people who disappeared on the road and survived? Do you think it's a legend? If so, you guessed it right again. We made up this story to trick you. Write in the comments which stories you guessed correctly and which ones you got wrong. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. If you want to test yourself again, watch our other videos. If something strange or mysterious has happened in your life, write the full details of the story in the comments, and we might include it in our future videos.